Give it another 2 minutes and then we'll get rolling.
Sounds great.
Welcome, Dr. Fickey.
Hi, Dr. Fickey.
Hi.
Dr. Fickey.
He said he was going to get on early so he didn't get bumped over to YouTube Live, Don. So I guess.
Well, that was smart. I got bumped last time.
You don't get in the first 1,000, Dr. Mason, you get bumped over to YouTube Live. So
Oh, wow.
Highly
there's-
variable quality there.
Yeah,
So
20-second lag.
You never know.
Okay, good to know.
Everyone else has a 20-second advantage.
we're going to give it I'm going to go tabs at 8:03. All right, everybody, welcome to everyone. It is June 15th, 2020, and this is the fourth in our series of co-sponsored webinars. And I'm Bill Levine from Columbia University, and it's a pleasure to host you all tonight. We're gonna get started here in a minute. It looks like some of you are still getting on, and we appreciate everybody coming tonight. I'd just like to briefly introduce our panelists. Most everyone here knows Ortho Mentor. The three co-founders are Dr. Tabs Ayer, Dr. John Kaplan, and Dr. Matt Varicallo from Miami, Pennsylvania, and Los Angeles. Tabs and John were fellows together, and Matt was one of their students, and they decided to form this thing called Ortho Mentor, and they have filled a void that has been really prominent and profound in the orthopedic space, as evidenced by these webinars, which are attracting thousands of people. So we're really indebted to them for their vision in forming this. The newest members to the advisory board for Ortho Mentor are Dr. Dawn Laporte, who is the Vice Chair of Education and Residency Director at Johns Hopkins University. And so we're thrilled to have Dr. Laporte as a permanent member of Ortho Mentor. And Dr. Cara Cipriano, fondly known as Dr. C to those who know her at WashU, is the Director of Medical Student Education and a passionate and fervent mentor and educator in the orthopedic space. And so she is the other newest member of the advisory board. Tonight, we are joined by a special guest, and that's Dr. Bonnie Simpson Mason. And Dr. Mason is the newest Vice Chair of Diversity and Inclusion at the ACGME. Now, you may not know her in that role, but many of you may well know her as the person who created Nth Dimension, which is one of the most profound programs that has really been revolutionary in getting people into orthopedics amongst other specialties. And we'll hear more about that. And so Dr. Mason, it's a pleasure to have you join us tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about, from your perspective, students, what should you be looking for in choosing a residency program? Whether it's COVID world or not COVID world, we all are trying to figure out what's the right fit. And hopefully at the end of this webinar, you'll have some good keys from all of these incredible educators and mentors on what you should all be looking for. So I will now turn it over to my friend, Dr. Tabs Ayer, to get us rolling.
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And before we get started with our webinar tonight, I really just wanted to take a few moments and share some thoughts with you. This here is my baby daughter, and she is due to enter this world in this coming October. And what I've been thinking about over the last few weeks is, what am I going to tell her about why the events of the last few days, the last few weeks, months, and several years keep happening? How do I explain to her specifically the issues surrounding the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, and George Floyd? I have no clear answer, but what I do know is that we need to use our voices to come together, to join forces in solidarity, to support our Black communities and our Black students now more than ever. Matt, John, and I started OrthoMentor as a way to modernize the delivery mechanisms of both student advising and mentorship. Our goal has always been to empower, to inspire, and to educate. In this current social climate, we need to use our platform to help affect change, amplify inclusivity, and optimize support for our Black students. We must acknowledge that we need to rise together to get through these tumultuous times. Hatred and divisiveness are counterproductive to what we as a human race need, particularly during this pandemic and as we look towards the future. It is not okay that the senseless killings continue to plague our country. It is our responsibility to build each other up, to advise and to mentor one another, to be role models such that we catalyze our capabilities at succeeding in life. Tearing each other down is not conducive to our abilities to achieve our full potential together. To this end, we are proud to have Dr. Bonnie Mason, the founder of Nth Dimensions and ACGME Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion on our panel tonight. She has trailblazed the way for many underrepresented minorities and women into various fields of medicine. She is a role model of mine for sure, and someone with whom our messages or her messages resonate with ours so closely. As we start our discussion tonight on how best to select residency programs, we want to highlight the importance of supporting one another, no matter how challenging things may seem. We're all frustrated, we're all tired, we're all strained, and we can recognize how much Black Lives Matter and the structural inequities that exist, amplified in part by the recent events taking place. Yet we can also feel mutual anguish about it all. And that's why helping one another is not only the important thing to do, but it's a bridge to rebuilding our own individual mental rebuilding. Brick by brick, talk by talk, we can and we must lift ourselves up by lifting one another up as well. So I encourage each of you to continue to explore where change must occur and where change must happen. That's why helping each other, advising and mentoring one another must not only be confined to a webinar here or an Instagram post there, or even a TikTok video for that matter. It must be coded into our DNA going forward. With that in mind, thank you so very much from the bottom of our hearts for your continued support and continued engagement. I will now ask Dr. Mason to share a few thoughts before we start tonight's discussion on how do I select a residency program. Dr. Mason?
Thank you so much, Dr. Iyer, Dr. Levine, Dr. Laporte, Dr. C, Dr. Kaplan, Dr. Barakello. It's my honor to be a part of this important platform, and especially for the opportunity to address your listeners, our watchers tonight, because it's my fervent belief that everybody that signed into this webinar tonight has the power to contribute to positive change. Everybody on this webinar has the power to use your voice as an ally for Black lives in America, but also Black lives in medicine. The issues that you see transpiring in the broader community are not foreign to medical education. We have all seen people who've been treated disparately, either as medical students, as residents or faculty, and as patients. And so it is up to each one of you to call foul when you see it. It is going to be your voice as an ally that really sparks and maintains the change moving forward, because it is going to be your voice that says, we won't tolerate this moving forward, because what we see is that racism, sexism, these things, especially now in the life of COVID-19, we see it's resulting in death. I mean, lives are on the line. So this is a humanity issue that we are calling each one of you to charge on. And because of that, I just want to lift up my friend, Dr. Dawn Laporte, who has been an ally of mine. Think of yourself as an ally. Dr. Laporte and I, we traversed the halls of orthopedic surgery residency some years ago. But as we've sat on the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgery Leadership Development Committee together, and we've seen each other at the Academy over the years, Dr. Laporte has always extended herself to me with respect, going out of her way, inviting me in, making me feel a part of, especially when there are less than 200 African-American female orthopedic surgeons in the country. And when we go to a conference where there are 12, 15,000 people, can you imagine how it feels when you don't belong? So Dr. Laporte, I just want to thank you right now in front of everybody for always extending your hand to me and being supportive and making me feel a part. Like orthopedics was actually for me, even though we didn't necessarily look like each other, but you invited me in. That's how you ally for yourselves and for other people. As an ally, it is critically important that you use your voice. And I think that's something I wanted to empower everyone to do here on this webinar tonight. It's going to be the young people. No disrespect to Dr. Levine, myself, and Dr. Laporte. We're the veterans on the call. It's going to be the younger people, Dr. C, Dr. Iyer, Dr. Kaplan, Dr. V down below. You all are going to make the change, insist on it. Our country depends on it. Our profession depends on it, and patients' lives depend on it. So we're counting on you. Thank you so much, Dr. I. And Dawn, I wanted to lift up my friend. Did you want to say anything?
Dr. Mason, thank you so much for your extremely kind comments. You've been an amazing colleague all the way through. I just want to say that it's very important to me, and I think to everyone, to be an ally and to be willing to have critical conversations. And I think you should want to engage with people who don't look like you and respect everyone that you work with, and to encourage and to support people of diverse backgrounds to seek out and to reach leadership roles and to achieve their greatest expectations. And I think that's what we're all looking to do.
Yep, it's being inclusive. So thank you.
That was absolutely so well said, Dr. Mason and Dr. Laporte. Thank you for echoing such wonderful statements as well. I think we can all agree that this conversation needs to be had, no matter how challenging it may be. And I'm really, really happy that we're able to utilize this platform to do so. I'd actually like to extend the first question to Dr. Mason specifically, as we now sort of make our transition slightly to some of the content, core content of the webinar tonight. How have you, especially in your work with your students through Nth Dimensions and beyond, what kinds of things do you encourage students to look as far as residency programs, as it relates to our initial conversation starter now, and even beyond that? What kinds of things do you, or pearls that you ask them to kind of really pay attention to when students are looking into residency programs?
So I think everybody's going to have some material contributions to this particular, to answer this particular question. What's important for me, and so because we're talking about diversity, let's just stay on that road right now. We want all students to observe the culture of a program, and you want to go someplace where where the environment is conducive and supportive to you, and whatever that need is for you. And so that requires that we do a little bit of self-reflection before we just go out and apply to all 156 programs. What do you need to be successful? For me, I wanted to go to a residency program that was supportive of women. And when I trained, there were only a couple of handfuls of programs in the country that were supportive of women. And at that time, Howard University had arguably graduated more women in orthopedics, much less more women of color in orthopedics. So I knew that was going to be a top spot for me, because I could see myself not just matching there, but matriculating successfully there. And in relationship with the faculty at GW at the time that Howard had, and at Children's Hospital, it was going to be really, really important for me to be in that environment that I knew already was going to be tough, would require excellence, academic and mental fortitude, those things were going to be required. But I wanted to make sure that that environment was going to be conducive to me being successful long-term. So for me, that's the number one recommendation I have on my list.
Dr. Laporte, same kind of question. What are you advising, students at Hopkins as far as, ways to tease out what program may be important to them, and what sort of attributes of a program, whether it's, presence of female faculty or other considerations for that matter, do you kind of get them to think about in terms of selecting programs off the bat?
Thanks. I think it's really ideal to get a feel for the culture of the program, and I think that's a little challenging this year, but you want to find a program that you can thrive in and also be happy at, because you're going to spend an awful lot of time at work there over those 5 years. And we're advising the students to reach out to a resident in a program that you think you would be interested in. You can look at the website to get a look at, it gives you a window into the diversity of the program and what do the classes look like, but to get a feel for what are the resources and how do the residents get along with each other, and is it a place that you would want to be? I think that really the best way is to talk to somebody who's there or who's been there, and using ideally resources, either other residents in your program that came from that medical school, or somebody from your medical school who's there training, or talk to your program director and they can set you up with someone, or reach out to the program coordinator there. I think the residents in the programs are going to be very happy to speak with you, and I think that gives you maybe the best insight into the culture of the program.
Hey, Tabs,
Yes, Dr. Levine.
couple of questions coming in about how can, I'm sorry, Dr. Ayer, how can students get contact information of residents in programs? So Dr. Laporte, if somebody's interested in Johns Hopkins program, is there a pathway that you have set up, or at University of Miami or at WashU, for example, guys? You want to each kind of handle that?
Sure, I'll start. So we do have on our website, under the residency program page, some points of contact, residents that are happy to speak with applicants, which is probably all the residents, but we have a handful up there. You also absolutely can reach out to myself or our coordinator, whose emails are on the site, and we're happy to speak with you directly. I'm very happy to speak with students directly, or to set them up to speak with any residents or faculty members if they would like.
Dr. C?
Dr. Cipriano.
So a lot of that, I agree that talking with residents is probably the best way to get a sense of the culture, and ideally to talk to more than one of them. I think a lot of that this year for us is a lot of effort has been put into virtual, like offering virtual rotations and other social media contact points like Twitter. Our website is being redesigned, and so there will be opportunities to get to know the residents there. We're hoping to have, or planning to have, some sessions that are just for students and residents, so that you don't have faculty there, much like the social hours and other points during the interview day, when you really get to talk to them without faculty present. And I think that is the best way to do it. In terms of how to get an email address, I'm sure that any of our residents would be happy to talk to people out there. I would check out the website and the virtual rotation type offerings. And those are really good ways to get in touch with someone that you feel like you click with and would have a good conversation with, and then follow up from there with an email.
at least at University of Miami, certainly you can reach out to, and what I would suggest in general, if you reach out to residency coordinator emails, and ask them the question, hey, is there any way I could speak with a resident to get a little bit more insight into the program? Most residency coordinators are, they're very understanding, but especially with everything going on right now. But particularly, there's often a resident who at least here, that's designated to sort of talk to students to kind of help command outreach in terms of, here it's called like a recruitment chair, if you will. But that is something that I think many programs probably have, whether it's formally or informally. But I would encourage reaching out to the residency coordinators as a way to kind of find out faculty members that are, who would be willing to speak with you, as Dr. Laporte said, or also residents at the same time to get a little bit more of a feel for the program. Dr. Kaplan, Dr. Varicallo, how was it at USC and Drexel respectively?
The go-to person would be the coordinator. The residency coordinator could help put you in contact with the email addresses for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I would piggyback off of what everyone said. There's a lot of avenues you can go down to get this. You have to put the effort in to find the information, but you can find it. You can go online, you can go to websites, you can find the coordinator's information, you can contact the program director, you can reach out to the chief residents. You can find them on social media. I mean, this information is readily available out there. It takes some effort. It's not on a list handed to you, but you can track it down fairly easily. And what we always go back to with OrthoMentor is you can also rely on your mentors to help you make these connections and contacts. So use all those different avenues, just like anything else.
As everyone knows, we've been talking a lot in our first 3 webinars about how proactive you have to be as a student this year. Yeah. And so we're going to say that again. We learned from our last webinar that you all were going to apply to 3 away sub-Is plus your home program if you're not at an orphan situation. So that means you had 4 programs that you were likely very interested in. You have to be extraordinarily proactive at those 4 places. You should have already been, a lot of students have already been contacting people, and that's what you should be doing. UCSF is on our chat room and says that they have bi-monthly info sessions and small group discussions and a website to go at. So I think everyone's trying to do something a little different. We created at Columbia what we call the CLIP, the Columbia Longitudinal Informational Program. And that is a one-on-one buddy system where students are paired with a resident and with a faculty member. It's over a 5-month period. So it's trying to get some longitudinal touch points on your schedule, not on our schedule. It's not a virtual sub-I. There's no mandatory requirements. It's only at your, because we know and understand the pressures you have of doing 2, maybe 3 home sub-Is. So everyone's trying to kind of figure this out, and it's obviously a work in progress. And I think we're all in the same boat, as we keep saying, to try to get you guys as much information as we can. But you have to take the bull by the horns. As a student on this webinar right now, if you're saying what's going to be given to me this year, you might not be matching. You need to be saying, what am I going to do to be as proactive as possible to get out ahead of this?
I actually, on that same note, because I know, the amazing pipeline program that Anthem mentions has, where it does a lot of pairing very early on for many students. So Dr. Mason, my question is in this vein, for those students who maybe who engage with you or engage with Anthem mentions, but don't necessarily go through the pipeline program per se, what are some, sort of tips and tricks just from a networking perspective that you can offer advice to to all the students listening as to how best to gauge the information or garner the information that they're trying to get, whether it's operative experience or even like call schedules, as Dr. Cipriano was alluding to earlier, or research experience, whatever it may be. What kinds of strategies can you recommend that they utilize in order to kind of get this information if it's just not readily available, as Dr. Kaplan was mentioning?
Yeah, I think Dr. Levine's comment on being proactive is critical. So your determination and stick-to-itiveness is going to help you garner the information you need. Nobody's going to give you anything. Let's be very, very clear. Check with the people who have graduated from your medical school, who've matched into the specialty you want to go into. You have a built-in network. So if you're not reaching out to number of 5, 10, or 15 people, then you're not doing and leveraging the contacts that you already have, right? So those are alums from your school who are likely going to be very, very happy to speak with you. No matter what program they matched into, they can help give you some key details about the different programs where they even interviewed, where they rotated. So you can actually maximize your reach by gathering information from all of these data points. And then also too, when you're looking at those 4 programs that were mentioned, reach out to those interns in the specialty that you're interested in, because they just went through the process you went through. Okay, so those are the people who are closest with boots on the ground to your process. And granted, you're going to be going through it digitally, but they still collected a lot of information. They probably still have their spreadsheets with where they, recorded and documented everything that they learned. I'm sure they'll share it with you. It's just sitting there on their hard drive now. Ask them to share that with you. Get your interest group together and you all share information. This is, going to be a critical time for you all to act smarter and be very, very judicious with your steps. But collecting that data should not be a barrier. You have to go and get the information. Nobody's going to give it to you. So leverage your networks.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm going to ask, both Dr. Veracallo and Dr. Kaplan to chime in on this in a second. What sort of things can, students listening do as far as engagement via social media? Because obviously OrthoMentor was in part started, via social media platform. So how can students sort of utilize, the click of a button to sort of connect, as Dr. Mason is referring to, with people at hand? What sort of strategies would you recommend as far as taking advantage of the technology that they have at their disposal?
Well, I've had several students do it already through Twitter and Instagram, and I think what they'll notice is across the board, there's a variable response rate that you'll see. I'm a little bit worse with Instagram, so to speak. So because just my following and everything, so if you're finding that you're not getting the response that way, what actually the most effective students who've reached out to me have messaged me in one platform and said, is it better to email you? Because it had been like 10 to 14 days since I'd responded. So then I said, yeah, actually, this is a lot better. So send me an email. So that's what I would say is be open to these various forms of engagement, but also ask the individual, is it okay to reach out this way? Or would you rather email? Or I know Dr. Iyer, you love calling people. I'm a little bit better on getting emails back. So just, and I think the other point that I want to highlight is all of Dr. Mason's comments have augmented what we have previously said. So as a student, if you're listening on this webinar, take that into consideration, because yet again, it's another highly esteemed individual who's been a pioneer in this area, echoing the same comments that we've said before. And when the students will email me saying, I don't have a home program, I'm like, just go back the last 4 years and look at where all the students have gone into orthopedics and matched into various programs. At least reach out to them. That's definitely a network you should take advantage of.
Speaking as someone who did not have a home program,
there you go.
You have orthopedic surgeons in your community. You have orthopedic surgeons in your city. And if not, you can reach out to them digitally. If a college senior can reach out to us and say, I'm going to be an Information scholar, and follows us for 4 years, all the way through college, when he gets into medical school, who do you think we're going to remember? Because he was consistent, he reached out, and he didn't let his physical boundaries stop him. You really have no excuse. Okay, you just really don't. All right.
Dr. Mason just laid it out for everybody.
In fact, it's an opportunity to show that you're dedicated.
That much more dedicated, because I don't have a home program. Let me show you how badly I want this. I'm going to be in everybody's inbox constantly, and I know you're busy. So whenever you have an opportunity to respond, I'd love to speak with you. Thank you for your time. I'm showing up because I'm committed and dedicated, and I'm going to show up with excellence.
And actually, just to give people some context, when, granted, I knew, so Dr. Kaplan and I were fellows, Matt at the time was a medical student, now is Dr. Veracallo, but where I did residency. But even me reaching out to Dr. Levine and Dr. Mason, that was I just reached out, and it was literally just a cold email. And, we have been so honored and lucky that they would take the time to respond and engage and so on. But it just goes to show you that how much you can connect with individuals just with a simple message. And it really can, elevate whatever it is you're trying to do or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Dr. Ayer, can I ask a couple questions that are coming in?
Sure.
I'm gonna ask this to Dr. Laporte, and I think this is a really hard question. It's a great question, and it's a hard one though. There's a number of students that are trying to understand, we're talking about culture, and you should be figuring out what the culture of a program is. How do they figure out the culture of interconnectivity and interaction of residents if they aren't able to spend a month there like they would have last year?
I think that's a great question and important.
That's why I asked you.
Thanks a lot. So I think, one is reaching out to, if you know somebody in that program, or if you know there's somebody there from your program, they can give you a feel for that, or these bi-monthly meetings or resident happy hours. You can get a bit of a feel for that. Some of the websites will have pictures, like a photo gallery of interactions. You can't make that up. You can make up 3 pictures, but if they have, 100 pictures of residents doing team building activities, that shows at least a culture of the residents getting together and doing something. You may also, I'm not great with social media, I'm trying to be better, but you may want to look at their Instagram page. That also often will host a number of pictures. And if you go back over the course of a year or more, I think you can get a bit of a feel for resident interactions. But I think still possibly your best opportunity for that is speaking to somebody who's there or who has been there. And I think one other resource that overlaps with what was discussed but wasn't necessarily mentioned is talking to medical students that you meet in this process that are in your same group applying, that are at a medical school, at a program that you're interested in, because I think they'll be very upfront about how that program is, and they're rotating there, and you can share that information amongst yourselves. I think you are all a great resource for each other because you know about your program.
Tabs, Dr. Ayer, sorry. There's a number of questions about if I'm an IMG or if I'm a DO. We kind of addressed that in our last webinar, and do you want to just refer people to our FAQ sheet?
Yeah, I think for the international medical grads and osteopathic students, a couple great resources are we have an FAQ sheet that just came out on Medium, kind of post the last webinar we did, as Dr. Levine just mentioned. There's also specifically for osteopathic students, a Yellow Journal article that we co-authored recently, discussing the merger and the impact that the merger of the American Osteopathic Association and the ACGME just recently underwent for orthopedics specifically. Many other specialties sort of did that, prior, but now every specialty falls under this umbrella. But that is a great read. And if any of you need a copy of the article, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to send it to you. I think one other thing that I would, from the osteopathic perspective specifically, is the NRMP, so National Residency Match Program. They released a data set about stats related to every specialty for the DO kids that matched into that 2 years ago, so going back to 18. And that was before the merger for a handful of specialties, including ortho. So that's another great resource. And again, it's just the average of those who matched and averages of those who didn't in terms of step 1, COMLEX, research, and all these kinds of things. So it's at least a great primer in addition to our article to kind of get a feel for competitiveness, if you will. But again, I'm happy to talk with folks offline, as I have had a handful of osteopathic and IMG kids reach out as well. I wanted to actually ask Dr. Kaplan and Dr. Cipriano a question about, specific in y'all's answers, respectively, is important. When you were going through the process of applying to residency, what kinds of things struck you as being important going through the process? And then now in retrospect, in hindsight, what kinds of things how do you think that changed? Do you think the same things were just as important, at the tail end of residency, or are they pretty much different?
Go ahead, Dr. Cipriano, you go first.
Okay. A really important question. So I think some of the things that I realized during the during the process of away rotations and making my rank list, for me, there were some things like the size of the program. I personally had a preference for a smaller program. I sort of had that preference and, went to a smaller college. It just felt more manageable and cozy to me. Then their location, you don't want to decide everything based on location unless you have a real reason for that to be a priority. But you do want a place that you want to live for 5 years. And then there were some other things that I picked up from away rotations, for example, that were maybe a little less obvious, but the number of fellows, and more importantly, the culture surrounding fellows and residents. I observed that two programs that had a large number of fellows could have a very different relationship there. And you really want to go somewhere where the fellows are supportive and the resident education is still prioritized. And in those situations, fellows are fantastic resources. They can teach you a lot. They can help you with research. They are a less intimidating junior attending. So there are a lot of advantages. You just don't want to be in a program where the fellows are given or take all of the cases, and that's considered okay. So a lot of that comes back to culture, which was what we were talking about before, and something that you need to think about rather than just writing down, for example, number of fellows. You also want to think about the volume of the clinical volume, and there's definitely a variety of that between programs. Case logs and numbers of cases tell part of the story, but again, not all of it. So ask the residents how much do you think you had enough volume? How confident are you coming out of residency that you've seen what you need to see? And I think because you asked what I learned, in retrospect, I would say that most students probably focus mostly on operative volume, which is certainly important, and are tempted to focus on early operative experience. As a medical student, you just want to dive in there and be an orthopedic surgeon. And so the programs that let you do that as a PGY2 seem very attractive. I would say that that has advantages, but also please do not underestimate the value of clinical volume of like in the clinic space, like outpatient and inpatient evaluation, doing that and learning your indications, because that is truly the most important thing you will learn in residency. So go to a place where you spend time in clinic with your faculty and where they take the time to teach you, and you have good role models to get those indications down, because you'll be practicing your surgical technique for the rest of your career.
Can I make a comment, Dr. Ayer?
Sure.
I think that this is one of those questions that everybody, we talked about it last time, that there was a famous study that the most important reason that people were asked to rate what's most important at various levels of training. And fourth year students, number one selection criteria for picking residency was how early do I have the sharp, dangerous object in my hand? And as a fifth year resident, that answer changed precipitously to mentorship, to lifelong learning, to what is the culture of the program and who are the people that I'm surrounded by. Remember, for the students on this webinar, you're spending 5 incredible years of your life and then the next 30 as an alumnus of that program. And that's going to be who you are going to be an ambassador of forever. As a former director for the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery, I can tell you that every one of the residency programs you're going to, unless they're on probation or unless they're in trouble, are going to teach you how to be an orthopedic surgeon. You're going to get enough surgical volume, you're going to do enough peds, and you're going to do enough sports and all of that stuff. It's all those other intangibles that you're going to try to figure out. Dr. Mason and Dr. Laporte used a word that I would like you guys to think about as one key takeaway from tonight, because it's a word that I use all the time when students are sitting in my office in the old days or where they're sitting on my FaceTime on my computer now. And that question that I ask them is, what program will allow you to thrive? I'm not interested in getting 6 of you students out there today to come to Columbia and just mail it in and get by. We want to provide the resources, as does every other program, hopefully, out there. Provide the resources, provide the culture, provide the environment to let you guys take your skills that you've excelled in up to this point, because you're the 1% crew, and you want to now take it to that next level. That's what we look for. And that's what I'm looking for. And so that's what I heard Dr. Laporte and Mason say as well. What is going to let you thrive? And you guys have to figure that out. And that's what part of this webinar tonight is all about, is figuring out those qualities that'll let you guys thrive in your selected residency program.
And I think, so Dr. Kaplan, I want to hear your take on this, because I know that you've thought a lot and shared some thoughts offline with me about this. So tell me, how did your perspective applying to residency and your specific interest in USC as a program, how did that evolve or change by the time you finished out residency before you came to a fellowship in Baltimore?
Well, I think Dr. Mason, she, in everything she said in the beginning, which was all extremely important, she slipped it in very nonchalantly, which is, you have to know your personality. It was the answer to the first question you asked her. And before applying, I had the benefit of, I came from a program, I went to University of Illinois in Chicago, where there's a large number of students and not a large number of mentors. So you get thrown into every rotation and you just have to figure it out. And it is the definition of sink or swim. But you learn a lot about your personality very quickly, and you learn what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are and what your wants are. So for me, before I even applied, I said, what is my personality like? What do I want? And it really wasn't about surgical volume. I wanted to be at a hands-on program, but not necessarily surgically, meaning I wanted to be at a program where you had mentors and you were in clinic working with people, and in surgery working with people, and they were teaching you hands-on, and there were workshops and cadaver labs and all these other things you could do to supplement. I'm going to deviate for a second and actually say none of these programs are truly going to prepare you to be an orthopedic surgeon, because you'll learn more about how to be an orthopedic surgeon in your first year, your first 2 years, your first 5 years, and it's going to continue lifelong. But the point is you're going to get all of your surgical skills through your first few years of practice. And even then you're going to build on it. So just because you do a certain number of cases in your second year does not mean you're going to be a great orthopedic surgeon. And just because you only do a certain number of cases that's maybe less than somewhere else doesn't mean you're not going to be a great orthopedic surgeon. So I think for me, it came down to, well, just to get to USC, it really came down to personality. And I was looking for a program where the residents were a family. And I was looking for a program where you could tell that people really connected and had lifelong bonds. And that's what USC ended up being for me. I mean, it really is, it's trauma heavy. You have a lot of residents that are on call at the same time, and you build strong relationships with your co-residents and your peers. And a lot of my best friends are still my peers in my residency. And that's really what I went to that program for.
That I think you hit the nail on the head with something that was very important. And I want to ask Dr. Mason, Dr. Laporte this question, pivoting from Dr. Kaplan, as far as, the relationships, and namely mentorships, and how important, whether when you were looking for programs, each of you respectively, when you were looking for programs, was the concept of mentoring, even if it wasn't super formalized, how important was that in your decision to pursue a given residency program? And now looking back, how important do you think it is for students to consider a program that has a very robust mentoring program as part of the career development process?
Want to go, Dr. Laporte?
Sure. Thank you. I think that's incredibly important. I think when I was looking, and it was some time ago, but even extending now, you want a program that prioritizes the residents and where the residents are going when they're done. And a large part of that is mentorship and professional development, and that's longitudinal. And just like Dr. Kaplan was saying, it's not all about how many cases you're doing, or you're going to be a good orthopedic surgeon, hopefully a great orthopedic surgeon by the time you finish, but whether you can achieve your goals in research, whether you can have an opportunity for a leadership role, whether you're exposed to outreach, if that's something you're interested in, hinges on the support of the program and finding the right mentors. And I think maybe when I was a resident, we didn't have formal mentorship programs, but we absolutely would seek out and find our own mentors. Now I think many programs have a one-on-one faculty resident mentorship program, and peer mentoring. A senior resident with a junior resident is a great resource. And that continues long after you finish your program too. And I think that's something you can get a feel from talking to alumni of the program, or even to some of the faculty members. And I think nothing takes the place of that. That's how you're going to find your opportunities when you're done looking for fellowship first, and then for jobs, and then for leadership roles down the road, or research. Or that's how you're going to become the best that you can be, is through these contacts and mentors. So I think that's very important.
And I think the programs that articulate that mentoring is a core value of that program, that's a great sign. That means they're interested in making sure that there are either one or two people who don't necessarily have to look like you, are there to support you, get to know you first, support you, help you navigate some of the ups and downs, which we will all have, but they are interested in mentoring you through this. It can be a challenge. No, it is a challenging process, right? So their acknowledgement of how and why the importance of mentorship is a very intentional, proactive approach that they take to making sure their residents are successful. That shows that there's some leadership in that program that is thinking about your success before you even get there. I mean, because you never know. So Dr. Kaplan went to USC. Dr. Kaplan's chair at USC now is Dr. Jay Lieberman. I was an intern at UCLA. Dr. Lieberman was a first year attending. I'm a PGY1 on my way to Howard to do my residency. When we met back then, he didn't cut me any slack, but he made sure I was prepared to go into residency. Fast forward X number of years, not going to tell you how many, Dr. Lieberman is interested in mentorship. He calls me at Nth Dimensions, and now Dr. Lieberman has taken 2 to 3 Nth Dimension scholars over the past couple of years. Now those scholars are matching at USC, and that is mentorship in action. You want to see people walk the walk, not just talk the talk, okay? So if that's and we're telling you that's something that you should look for in a program, by that demonstrated actionable evidence of mentorship and inclusion, making sure that everybody is making it through successfully through that program.
Dr. Ayer.
Yeah.
Question for you.
Yes.
It's a really good question, and I think it gets to the heart of a lot of the issues we're talking about. And we're telling the students to reach out to the residents and reach out to people and be proactive. And a student has very astutely asked the question, well, aren't all the residents going to feel compelled to say that their program's perfect, that they get the best case volume, they have the best diversity, they have the best everything? And are they really going to be honest? Dr. Mason's shaking her head vociferously, but you take it first, Dr. Ayer.
Yeah, so I think with the response to that question, so if you're engaging with lots of folks on some of these virtual happy hours, or even online, you may, and Dr. Kaplan, myself and Dr. Varacallo have been talking about this recently, actually, that how legitimate, how much real information they may give you in some sort of public space may be a little skewed. So that's very true. But I do think that the best way, and it's why, as Dr. Varacallo was alluding to, why I jump on the phone with everyone, is that has to be a very individualized approach. So even though you might interact with a handful of residents on a virtual happy hour or through a program like CLIP at Columbia, or what they're doing with Dr. Cipriano WashU or elsewhere, to try to get a little bit more one-on-one time, to be able to get a little bit more of a feel without there being any implication potentially for the resident to speak freely, I think is going to be a better bet with regards to garnering the information that you really want. I do think that you are always, even on away rotations, believe it or not, you're not always seeing what is exactly like. I mean, you're getting a snapshot in time. Maybe you happen to be at the nice hospital on sports, whereas you're not necessarily in sort of the not so great hospital, you know, doing trauma as an example. And so you even then may have a skewed perception of what a given program's like. So that being said, you really need to take everything with a grain of salt, ask questions, and just as we've all been saying tonight, don't hesitate to be proactive and reach out again and again and again as much as you can to get the information you want, right? Because no one's going to advocate for you more than yourself, as Dr. Barakala would always say. You have to advocate for yourself, and I think that's a critical thing in getting the information you want.
And it's how you ask questions too. I mean, you can easily, even if you feel like a resident may not be giving you all the information you need, you can ask probing questions, you can ask different forms of the same question, and you can look for consistency with their answer too. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can get information from residents, even if you think they're not telling you everything off the bat.
I actually wanted to ask a question to Dr. Levine and Dr. Cipriano, based on what Dr. Laporte and Dr. Mason were talking about. At Columbia and WashU respectively, are there formal mentoring programs in place for the residents specifically? And do you think that that has elevated the success and performance of the residents at those respective programs and all the things that, you know, students want to do, whether it be operating, you know, cutting on day one, or whether it be research, or whether it be, you know, education, or what have you? What kinds of things do you think have helped from a mentorship perspective, if those things exist at your institutions?
Dr. C?
Sure. Yes, we do have a formal program. I have 2 mentees formally, one of which is graduating this year, and kind of sad about that. I think as a lot of people coming into residency might feel that a lot of mentorships sort of evolve naturally. And so to be paired with someone in the beginning may feel a little bit contrived. I will say that it is still incredibly valuable for a few reasons. One, the mentor is someone who checks in on you on a regular basis and is always there for you, follows your progress, and it's another way to make sure that no one falls through the cracks. So we have a very dedicated program director and associate program director, but this is one more person who's kind of watching you specifically across your rotations, because each of your attendings will mentor you, hopefully, to some extent while you're rotating with them, but no one's looking at the big picture besides your program director and maybe your chair if they're very involved. So I think it's very important in that respect. And when we meet at the end of the year about the residents, we usually, we just kind of check in everyone's involved, and the mentor is on and sort of follows their research and all the different elements of their training to make sure and help develop strategies and coach and talk to that person. The other thing is that even if in the beginning it feels a little bit awkward, like, okay, someone's making me come to this meeting every 3 months and making me talk about these 4 topics, it really does evolve. And I'm just so pleased to say that my mentees, even though we're sort of introduced through this formal program, I think that it's been a really meaningful relationship. And one of ours, the one who's graduating, when she was looking at her job contract and deciding what job to take and how to negotiate and what points to bring up in that conversation, called me every step of the way, which was really, I think, a great example of how those relationships develop over time.
Dr. Levine, your perspective?
Yeah, thanks. Every intern is assigned a 5th-year resident as a mentor. Just to help with that transition, every intern's assigned a faculty mentor. Dr. Cipriano nailed it on the head. You may have a faculty mentor that turns out to not be the perfect fit, but in the beginning, it's nice to just have someone there. As you de-differentiate and you're going to be a tumor surgeon, you're probably going to end up with Dr. Tyler. as your mentor. So that's going to happen naturally. But in the beginning, I think it's really important. I don't think there's any topic that's more important. You know me well enough than mentorship. It's what we hopefully are all here doing and why we're all here. When we talk about lifelong learning at the ACGME or at the ABOS or at any of our organizations, that's the whole point, is when Dr. Kaplan said you learn in those first 3 years, if you've got a tough case, you want to be able to call one of your mentors from your residency or from your fellowship or both. But I can't tell you how many calls we get, our faculty, from people from the residency, not just from their fellowships, because they've had 5 years to establish incredibly tight relationships that are critical. You know, these are people that you are spending more time with than your loved ones in your house often. And so you want those relationships to hopefully be productive ones where you have that kind of ability to say, hey, Dr. Laporte, I got a tough case. Can I give you a holler? And she's like, of course you can. That's what I'm here for. That's what mentorship is all about. It's about lifelong learning. There's a lot of difference between mentorship and coaching. And I think it's a whole nother topic for another day, but coaching is about specific tasks. Mentorship is about lifelong goals and aspirations and helping to steer the course for your future.
And I think that's a great point, because as everyone on this webinar tonight could attest, that these longitudinal relationships certainly help to facilitate development of allies, as was mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. But then also at the same time, they do, when you start planting those seeds, it really requires a lot of nurturing in order for it to blossom into the mentorships that we're constantly talk about. So with that in mind, I want to go around the panel and ask everyone to say, top 3 things that you would suggest that students look for in a residency program today in 2020 during this upcoming cycle, against the backdrop of COVID and everything else going on. So I'll just start at the corner here. So Dr. Laporte, top 3 things you're going to tell students to look into when they're thinking about programs to pick. I think you're on mute, Dr. Laporte.
Sorry, yes, I am on mute. I would look at the culture of the program and the priority on resident education. I would look at try to get a feel for the relationships between resident and resident, but also residents and faculty, because I think that also goes to the focus on residents. And I would try to get a feel for the resources in whatever area you're most interested in, whether that's research or outreach or leadership, outside of basics of orthopedics.
Dr. Mason? I think you're on mute also.
My top recommendations probably won't be too different, but I think the students, as students, you're going to have to be a little even more aggressive in making yourself and demonstrating your excellence to programs. And so you may have to reach out a little bit more often, find the vehicles in which you can interface and make sure you're in those spaces. And so you want to look for programs who have created opportunities for engagement, especially in light of this year's recruitment cycle. You want to make sure that you are looking for opportunities to engage with the residents so you can ascertain the culture. So communicating and being proactive via multiple avenues is still going to be, the onus is on you. And then finally, responsiveness of the program is also good, especially for more of the program coordinators who are always on the front lines to interface, whereas you may not get to Dr. Levine or Dr. Laporte right away, you still should have access to the program coordinators, and hopefully they're communicating with you in a way that gives you the information you need to be supported.
Bonnie, I don't sleep, so they always have access to me.
Oh, well, there you go. That doesn't surprise me.
Dr. Barrichello, top 3 things that you would recommend to students looking at programs right now.
One of my attendings used to always say an ideal training program for residents is one that can exist and function without residents, implying that the ancillary support staff is such that residents aren't always left doing the grunt work. So I think there's something to be said for that. That being said, just kind of my general message that I would say to the students is, you know, I would caution you on applying these blanket statements that, you know, we've touched on this before, where these kind of notions and these pearls, if you will trickle down through the student community where, oh, don't go to a blue collar program because X, Y, Z. What I would say is look at everything can always be spun in terms of positive optics. So in that standpoint, it would be, oh, maybe it's, you know, there's certain elements that could be good for going and training in a resident run program, such as autonomy, et cetera, and leadership. So I just would caution about that. And then I would also say, you know, maybe stay away from programs that farm you out, quote unquote, farm you out too often. Like we were talking about this before it all started, was programs where you're taking home call and you're driving from 5 to 6 different ERs. There's a law of diminishing returns in terms of academic experience that you'll get. May prove valuable later on whenever you're in attending and you're out in the community, but not so much whenever you're in residency.
Awesome. Dr. Kaplan?
I'll be quick. So I think look for programs where residents are happy. Look for programs where faculty are happy, and look for programs where residents and faculty are happy together. That's it.
Amazing. Dr. Cipriano?
I will just use my minute to echo what was said before about knowing yourself. I think that was a fantastic point. And you need to make sure that the priorities that the residency program expresses line up with your own priorities and values. On a more technical note, I agree with you know, if a program operates at a bunch of different places, you need to be okay with that. And look for a residency program that truly prioritizes the residents as they, you know, relate to, in relationship to the fellows, to the finances of the department, to the volume of just getting everything done, and the work that needs to be done in terms of what we think of as grunt work. Someone needs to be actively protecting the residency education in all of those conflicting priorities.
And Dr. Levine?
I boil it down to the 3 C's: the culture, the camaraderie, and the commitment to the residents. Those are your 3 C's. Figure that out and you'll be good at any of the places if they like those 3 things.
Well, those are all amazing things. And, you know, again, the advice from everyone tonight, and Dr. Mason, Dr. Laporte, Dr. Cipriano, Dr. Levine, Dr. Vericello, and Dr. Kaplan has been absolutely amazing. I hope that everyone listening tonight enjoyed this discussion as much as I did. We really appreciate your time, your effort, and your continued encouragement, support. Don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, particularly advice.orthomentor@gmail.com, or follow us on Instagram @orthomentor. If you ever need to holler at us, feel free to do so. Thank you again for your time tonight.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you all.
Good night.